Yeah, this morning I don't have a whole lot to report because frankly, there isn't a whole lot that's gone on in Des Moines. The first week of the session went by last week with the governor giving her address, as well as the Chief Justice and the Adjutant General of the Iowa National Guard. And that was about it. A few bills were introduced, but nothing earth-shaking. But let me step back just for a second and just remind you that this is the sixth year that they've had unified control by the Republicans in the state government. Both houses of the legislature as well as the governor's office are all under Republican control. And indeed, the Republicans have expanded their margins in both the House and the Senate. The House is now 60-40 Republican to Democrat, and the Senate is 32-18. So pretty much whatever they can come together and pass will end up on the governor's desk. And unless Speaker Grassley or Majority Leader Whitford decide that something's not going to move ahead, if they talk about it, it's probably going to become law. So that's kind of the backdrop. As you recall from our last get together, we on our agenda have talent as our number one issue by far and away. And then the second item that we had on our agenda for this session was placemaking. And we did have a brief mention of one tax issue, but a number of years ago, we kind of quit being so focused on taxes. Not so for the legislature. Legislature is totally focused on taxes. And indeed, their stated goal is to eventually eliminate the income tax in the state of Iowa. If you think about the fact that income tax, sales tax, and property tax are the three ways that we pay for things in the state, if you eliminate the income tax, it's sort of one of those bubbles that are balloons that as you squeeze it here, it's going to pop out someplace else. So if you eliminate income tax, we either have to drastically reduce services or we're going to see an increase in one of those two other areas. Nonetheless, the governor in her address last Tuesday really surprised, frankly, the legislature with her call for a flat tax. She's proposing to, over 4 years, eliminate the brackets in the income tax program and get down to a 4% flat tax that everybody would pay. Getting us to that promised land of being able to do our tax return on the back of a postcard. Whether or not she gets there is still a little bit up in the air. The bill has not actually been introduced. So none of the legislators have been able to see the detail yet, but both Whitford and Grassley have indicated at least interest in trying to look at the program and see if there's someplace they go with it. One other thing that was a little bit of a surprise to the legislature was that she called for a reduction in corporate income tax down to 5.5% from its current 9.8%. I think the surprise came because they weren't expecting her to say that in her address, although both the House and the Senate had indicated some interest in dealing with corporate income tax this year. You might recall that was the one tax issue that we talked about in our legislative agenda. And the problem will be that the Senate probably isn't going to take any serious action on reducing the corporate rate without talking about the tax credits that we've used over the years to try to make more palatable our high corporate rate, and particularly the research activities credit, and even more define the research activities credit refundability provision. If the credit is there for one of our big corporations that uses research activity tax credit, see John Deere, see Collins Aerospace, some of those sorts of companies, if they don't have the necessary tax burden that would offset the credit, then the state writes them a check, and that's considered to be refundability on that tax credit. That's what the Senate is really upset about, and I don't think that we'd see a reduction in the corporate rate without seeing some activity or some action on reducing that refundability provision of the research activities tax credit. So there you go, down in the weeds this morning on taxes. As far as workforce, There are two components of the governor's program that try to address workforce issues, but unfortunately they kind of skirt the issue versus going head on at it. There is mention of childcare accessibility and affordability. There's a mention of increased workforce housing, but primarily the first part of her two-part plan deals with tort reform. Last year, there were two tort reform bills that almost made it to the finish line and then got stopped. This is where she's kind of inserted her support for those. The second part of her workforce plan deals with unemployment reform. She wants to reduce the time frame for receiving unemployment from 6 months to 4 months. And she also wants to institute a waiting period that's longer than what's there now. Her statement in her address was that the safety net has become a hammock, and she wants to see these unemployment reform things go through so she can get people back to work quicker. They'd be required to take any suitable work versus just jobs that pay at the same rate that they were getting. She also wants to, under unemployment reform, have a re-employment division in the unemployment or in workforce development. So again, we were hoping for things that were going to deal with recruitment and retention of workers in the state. We're not sure that this meets the mark yet, but we're hopeful that other legislation will come forward during the session. Again, our other big issue was placemaking, and she was silent on placemaking. Our plan talks about the fact that up to $1 billion could be spent on placemaking across the state to make Iowa a more inviting place for people to be. The governor didn't speak to that, but we've found out since in a meeting that we had with Debbie Durham that the reason she didn't was because she and Debbie had decided that the placemaking efforts for the upcoming year would be run out of the Iowa Economic Development Authority, as opposed to running it through the legislature and having to get all gummed up there. So that was good news. Bad news was that they're going to put $50 million as opposed to $1 billion up for the plan. But hey, anything's better than nothing at this point. We're really happy that they are going to at least have some effort in the whole placemaking space. I think that's about all I've got right now, because they just haven't done much of anything else. And obviously, if there are any questions, I will stop for a second. I have one other issue. Okay. The one other issue is, just to remind you that we are having a Friday forum in February. We had a great forum a couple weeks ago in January, where we had Speaker Grassley and Senator Dotsford together with us. And we're going to try to continue on the tradition of great forums for this year in having Dustin Miller from the Iowa Chamber Alliance join us on February 11th. That'll be a virtual Friday forum. And we're going to be talking about some activity that the Iowa Chamber Alliance undertook, trying to do some surveying on talent and the needs and attitudes of people that might someday become workers in Iowa. So that will be then, and that'll be 8 o'clock on the morning of February 11th, Friday forum.